Welcome to the Daily Agenda. I suppose many people were quite surprised with the 10.5-year sentence handed down to Nathan Gill for accepting Russian bribes to ask questions in the European Parliament and spin Russian information operations. So what about Nigel Farage? When's Farage going to get his collar felt? Now, Farage was transported from fringe leader, a crank magnet, in truth. At the time, he was a crank magnet leading UKIP, the swivel-eyed loons, as David Cameron called them. Nothing untrue in that at all. And he was then taken by RT News, for those who don't know, that's Russia Today News, and teleported into an international household name. Everyone knew Nigel Farage after RT News had transformed him. And in return, all Nigel had to do was ask exactly the same questions, spin exactly the same Russian information operations that Nathan Gill did in the European Parliament and elsewhere. And then, of course, let's fast forward to the 12th of June 2015 at the Russian ambassador's private residence, where the UKIP solicitor, Elizabeth Jones, in my presence, in fact, stood about, to my right, she was stood about probably 35, 40 yards away, flanked by Anna Sabatin of the Foreign Office and a Russian woman that she'd recruited as an asset to stand next to them and listen to what she was saying to Ambassador Yakovenko. And it was Liz Jones that brokered the meetings between Ambassador Yakovenko and Aaron Banks and Andy Wigmore, commonly known as Wiggy. Both pissheads, quite frankly. And if you believe what Aaron Banks has to say about it, because he's lied about it, obviously, hasn't he? You know, they only had 2 meetings and then it went to 6 meetings. So 2 meetings, then 6 meetings. Why the lie? And on all 6 meetings, it was just a piss up with the Russian ambassador and they got smashed on vodka. I don't believe a word of it. I don't doubt they got smashed on vodka at all, in the slightest. But they didn't meet each other at the Russian embassy, did they, just to get smashed on vodka? Don't be puerile and ridiculous. Absolutely not. You see, what was happening, as Anna Sabatin said at the time, she believed that UKIP was taking money from the Russian Federation and tried to secure more funds from the Russian Federation to fight the EU ref campaign the following year. Well, interesting, because the thing is, Banks later came into, after a visit to Moscow, after his several meetings with Ambassador Yakovenko and a visit to Moscow. His wife comes from the Moscow region. And then suddenly millions appeared in his his South African mining interests. But nobody knew where it came from, apparently. And nobody can say it came from Russia. You know, South Africa, part of BRICS, etc. But anyway, you know, there is no conclusive, concrete evidence that it did come from Russia. We have to say that. And there's no conclusive, concrete evidence that Nigel Farage took bribes from the Russians to spin their information operations. There is ample evidence, of course, that he took £5,000 from RT News for appearance fees. He then later slimmed it down to less than £5,000, although we told a parliamentary committee it was £5,000. But he can't remember since whether it was £5,000, less than £5,000, or more than £5,000, because Nigel Farage denied meeting the Russian ambassador, but the photographic evidence proves that he did meet the Russian ambassador, Yakovenko. I also met Yakovenko, in a totally different context, that is. I was at the Russian embassy on said date to be nominated for a free speech award proposed by Sergei Nilobin, who was later classed as the Russian master spy in London by Karol Cadwallader and company. And of course, Nathan Gill, well, he wasn't there, but Liz Jones was there representing UKIP and a couple of other flunkies. And yes, absolutely, they just were just glued to the Russian diplomats. And Liz Jones in particular with Yakovenko spent an awful lot of time together. I've never seen Yakovenko give that amount of time to anyone. And it was a very, very long session where she was glued to his right shoulder, whispering conspiratorially in his ear. So, in truth, has Farage done the same as what Gill's done? I've absolutely no doubt that he has, at all. And the evidence proves it conclusively. In fact, a whole raft of people believe it. But right now, the leftists, primarily the Remainers or Rejoiners as they call themselves, and they're demanding that Farage be prosecuted for accepting Russian bribes. Well, it's not going to happen, is it? Let's be honest, it's not going to happen. And that's not because no evidence exists. It's not going to happen because Nigel Farage is leading an establishment safety valve operation to stop the floodgates of nationalism bursting through onto the socio-political scene, thus causing the establishment enormous nightmares, untold. Bigger nightmares than before, well, since the British National Party won 1 million votes. Just imagine that. In fact, Farage gave the game away himself, did he not? A very obvious clue. In late May 2024, when he was pressed on his potential comeback, he said, it's either me or someone like Nick Griffin. And faced with a choice like that, the establishment will always choose fake Farage. Because let's face it, he dismantled UKIP at the height of its success. He dismantled the Brexit Party at the height of its success, made a deal with Boris Johnson to put him and the Tories in power in a sweetheart deal, stood down his candidates, and then later the investigations by the Electoral Commission and the National Crime Agency into their collusion with the Russians were killed off, all by design. And the simple truth is, it's not just Farage, is it, in truth, every single UKIP MEP was playing the same game. If you look back over that period of time, you'll see that the UKIP MEPs were just totally in love with Russia and Putin and the Russians and spinning their information operations. Are we to presume that Nathan Gill was the only one who took any money from them to do it? I don't believe a word of it, not for 1 minute. The judge, in her summing up, Chima Grubb, there she is again, that Chima Grubb one. Yes, the mascot group judge, establishment's mascot group judge. That apparently, there's no evidence to prove anyone else did it. What a load of rubbish. Absolute bloody rubbish, quite frankly. If they're telling us that Nathan Gill was the only one who did this, then it's a pack of lies. So we have Starmer saying, there should be an investigation. Well, then why didn't he mount an investigation? Instead, he says, Farage must investigate his own party. My goodness, yes. Farage must investigate his own institutionally corrupt deepfake reform party to ascertain if there's any Russian agents and assets in there. My goodness, you'd be spoilt for choice, quite frankly. You'd be tripping over them. Really you would. Particularly when they've been recycled from UKIP or through UKIP, through the Brexit Party and into Reform UK. Absolutely. Gerard Batten, the man who became the Mr. Fixer to arrange Tommy Robinson's visits to Moscow with his contacts there. Has he been investigated? Not to mention his bent copper friends. And perhaps Jasna Bazdak, who waxed lyrical about Batten and his bent copper friends for many years. Perhaps she could pull us all in the loop about how corrupt that relationship was. She alleged and she insisted that no matter what these UKIP MEPs did, these bent copper friends would protect them, and that included the Deputy of Counter-Terrorism Command in London. So there you go, and since the meetings with Yakovenko, Aaron Banks has been debriefed by the CIA and MI6, played the game and saved his own skin. And Nigel Farage, of course, it goes without saying, Nigel is their hands-on man in the political world of halting the rise of nationalism. Why do you think Farage hates nationalists so much? Why do you think he makes all these ridiculous boasts about me, my person? I stopped the British National Party single-handed. No, actually, that was Nick Griffin. And he's now being pushed and promoted, isn't he? Yet again. I wonder why that is. Was it because someone else is trying to take over the British National Party? Suddenly, vested interests have wheeled out their Oxbridge rat to try and corrupt nationalism for a third time. Twice wasn't enough. These things come in threes. Don't be surprised about that. But we'll deal with Griffin. That is for certain. And as for Nigel Farage being prosecuted, never in a million years. What planet are these lefties living on? These rejoiners, they need to rejoin reality. There's not going to be any prosecution of Nigel Farage for accepting bribes from the Russians. Absolutely not. Because that would, in essence, dismantle Reform UK ahead of the dismantling project that is planned for later. And that will come either just before the general election in 2029, if indeed an election is held then, because of the events that are about to take place between now and then, or it will happen in government with a massive, crushing set of disappointing U-turns and failures and betrayals, because that's all fake Farage knows how to deliver. And the disaster that is unleashed after that will be something like we've never seen in this country since the English Civil War. Absolutely guaranteed. Then you will see the rise of the real militant right and massive conflict and infighting for one organisation to assert its dominance, escalatory dominance over the others. And that's the way it's going to be. Nathan Gill, the only one who took bribes from Russia. Well, if you live in cloud cuckoo land or you're spinning information operations for the British establishment, then perhaps you might just believe that. But all these, as I said, all these rejoiners who think that Farage is going to be prosecuted or should be prosecuted, have they actually bought into this nonsense that Farage is far right? I mean, look at George Galloway. He said on his podcast last week that Farage was courting the far right. Farage courting the far right. It's just living in cloud cuckoo land. Truly, living in cloud cuckoo land. Reform UK has no remigration policy of any description. You know, Farage is all over the place as usual. He's the king of U-turns. He's done more U-turns than a driving instructor. Nothing the man says can be taken at face value because he just does one U-turn after the other, and what he says today will be contradicted by the end of the week. That's the way it is with Farage, but his dumbass groupies don't pay attention to it because they just want to worship a fake leader presented to them by News International and then Russia Today News. Just remember that point. Nigel Farage became the prominent international figure that he is because of the hugely successful RT news operation on YouTube. Yeah, they exploited the algorithm with perfection. And then obviously when the Russians went in with the official SMO in 2022, all of that came crashing down, didn't it? And they got the boot from the Western Hemisphere. But before that, they created Nigel Farage. And let's not forget also that Paul Golding also went to Moscow. And there, apparently, he advised Tommy Robinson how to stash grifting proceeds in Russian bank accounts. We were told at the outset of this new Labour regime, it's actually New Labour, isn't it, that there was going to be an investigation into that funding. Where is it? Where's the outcome of this investigation? Nobody's seen any sight or sound of it. Is Starmer just swinging the lead, is he? You know, we would very much like to see the outcome of this investigation. But then again, if it reveals something that could give Tommy Robinson a 10.5-year prison sentence, that's not going to go anywhere either, is it? Because they need him as secondary safety valve operator. Okay? Nima Parvini, otherwise known as the Academic Agency, hit the nail on the head perfectly this week. And, you know, a lot of people on the right say, I don't want to watch him, you know, because he's Persian and he's lefty. Well, I don't think like that, in actual fact. I think differently. And Nima Parvini actually said, in the context of the riot, the thing to watch out for is Zionism, because the moment that takes root in your organisation, it's over. You're compromised, you become containment. And that is absolutely right. And Farage, Rupert Lowe, Ben Habib, Tommy Robinson, Nick Tanconi, they're all containment operators, and that includes Paul Golding. And most of them have connections to the Russian Federation, directly and indirectly. So those who believe there's going to be a prosecution of Nigel Farage, just never going to happen. Absolutely not. Why on earth would the establishment dismantle its safety valve operation ahead of schedule? It's just not going to happen at all in any way, shape or form. And I can tell you that for a fact. You know, I've been on Farage's case for many years. In fact, I exposed him in 2011, colluding with Hope Not Hate, communists, funded by the government. Yes, his mongs, for want of a better description, you know, is lemmings, still can't pay attention to that fact. And when they do, they say, oh, well, you see, the thing is, we had to keep out all these BNP people. But the BNP at that time was at the height of its success. It didn't need to infiltrate UKIP in any way, shape or form. It was not until just a few months later when News International and then RT News totally transformed the picture for UKIP and fake Farage. Just remember that. Don't ever forget it. Nigel Farage was transported to where he is today by Russia Today News. There is ample evidence that Nigel Farage did pretty much the same as what Nathan Gill did, spinning information operations, but there will be no investigation because 2 of them have been killed off already. There will be no prosecution of any description until fake Farage decides he doesn't want to play the game, and that won't happen because he loves his own ego, his personality, and the money, and the hero worship that comes from it, from all these lemmings. He loves that far too much. He's a grandiose narcissist. He's not going to give all that up, is he, by refusing to play the game? He's going to continue to play the game, and the game is this. It's either me or someone like Nick Griffin, and that's one thing the establishment can never tolerate. So in essence, I think we can just assume that Nathan Gill took one for the team, but whilst he was expecting 2.5 years in prison, he ended up with 10.5 years in prison, because the simple truth behind that is the establishment, who's thrown 34 billion of our money at this ludicrous war in Ukraine, has lost that war. The Ukrainian front is collapsing left, right and centre. The Russians are advancing everywhere. And probably by February, we'll be in a position whereby the Russians have pretty much everything east of the Dnieper. And Kiev will be ready to collapse, probably around about March, April, May time. 34 billion the British have wasted on it so far. Imagine what could have been done with that 34 billion. In fact, they could have spent some of it on prosecuting Nigel Farage and all the other UKIP MEPs like Gerard Batten and his bent copper friends. Couldn't they? But they won't do that, of course, will they? Absolutely not. Anyone who wants to challenge anything that I have said, no problem at all. Please do so. I'd advise you to go and read my latest book, Patriot Games, which was published 3 months ago. It's doing very well. It's been very successful. And it totally and utterly trashes the centre-right. And it also deals with all this Russian collusion business as well. So yes, not to the extent that I would have liked to have done. Because, you know, there is the very real risk of me getting 10 years in prison for exposing too much. And that's not an opinion, that is a fact. If I cross over that line, so I have to stay just inside this line to be able to continue to get this material out to you. Otherwise, I'll be off doing a 10-year sentence, probably in the cell next door to Nathan Gill or maybe Islamic State again, like it was last time. And you get the point I'm making? Because he who speaks the truth shall be struck down in solitary confinement. Not segregation like little Tommy and his pantomime prison sentences. I don't do pantomime prison sentences. I've only ever done real prison sentences in the general population. Okay? So Nigel Farage, he's never going to do a prison sentence of any description in segregation, solitary, or the general population because he's quite simply the chosen man of the establishment to lead this safety valve operation. But ultimately, it's going to fail, but it's going to prolong matters and drag it out for at least another 8 to 9 years, which is an awful long time when we're steering down both barrels of primary balkanization. But when it all comes to a head, when it all goes tits up, believe me, the best thing Farage can do, if he's not died of natural causes by then, is leave the country, because the anger that will erupt against him and his organised criminal gang will be absolutely breathtaking. Same with Tommy Robinson. That's what's coming in the near future. It seems a long time away. It's not, in truth. I don't know whether I'll live to see it either because of, you know, my serious health problems, basically. But in truth, I'm taking whatever time I have available to me now to help you chart a much better path. And so anyone who thinks Nigel Farage is going to get prosecuted for what he has most definitely done, it's just not going to happen. You know, same's also true with a string of Tories and New Labour MPs who had very close relations with the Russians, didn't they? None of them have been nicked for it. I wonder why. It's called establishment crime. Thank you for tuning in. Good night.